let's describe how to read sheet music. So essentially, sheet music is a group of symbols that we can use to interpret a musical idea. You can take this document and you can give it to anyone in the world who knows how to read sheet music. They can take their instrument and read it and understand what you're trying to do with your musical melody. Do you need to know a lot of music theory to read sheet music? No. Do you need to know a lot to write sheet music? Not anymore. You used to. But what's happened is a lot of softwares have replaced the need to understand a lot of musical writing because it just does all the work for you. And that's the method I recommend you use. So you compose your idea in your piano software or your digital audio workstation, whatever they use, and you export that, you import that in your writing software, such as MuseScore, which is the free open source one I recommended, and you let it do all the work for you in your piano roll, and then all you have to do is add in the details that your software missed. So let's just cover the fundamentals, and then you can get rolling from there. So this is your sheet music. You have your name of your piano piece, your musical piece. You have your second description. You have the arranger, the composer, some information about where it came from, and then it starts. It goes from left to right in a downwards motion. So left, right, then down to the next one, left, right, down to the next one, left, right, and so on. The first thing you'll see are the clefs. This is called a treble clef. This is called a bass clef. Where do these come from? If you're looking at a piano, a treble clef in general is anything from C. This is the middle C note, anything higher than middle C in general. And why do we have different clefs? Well, for piano at least, it's indicating your right hand. Anything that your right hand plays is usually a treble clef. Anything your left hand plays is in general the bass clef. Some instruments only have treble clefs or bass clefs because their notes are usually only higher than C or lower than C. So they usually only use one clef. The next thing that you'll see are these things called flats or sharps. So these are flats and these are sharps. And what they do is they indicate what scale you're in. When we're using a piano roll, you can see often something called a scale that just does all the work for you. You select a scale and you choose what note you want to start on and it will build the scale for you. So you don't really even have to memorize these things anymore. Your software can do that for you. But if we were to look back at where did these things come from, if I were to look at my piano and I were to hit some notes, if I would just look at the C major scale, if I were to move up and use the black notes, this is where sharps and flats come from. The sharps and flats indicate only these black notes, for the most part. If you move up from a white note to a black note, we call it a sharp. If you move down from a white note to a black note, we call that a flat. When do we use flats? When do we use sharps? Because you will only ever see flats here, or you will only ever see sharps there. You will never see both. Why? If we were to look at these notes here in the C major scale again, we hit each note in the scale once. We hit the C, the D, the E, the F, the G, the A, the B, and the C. If we were to pick a different scale though, for example, the F major scale that has a flat in it, we still only want to use these names of notes once. We want to use the F once, the G once, the A once, the B once. In this case, we want to hit this note, and we could call it an A sharp, but we've already used A in the scale. We got F, G, A sharp. That's confusing for someone trying to read the music. So we call it something else. We have to call it a B something, and it's either a B sharp or a B flat. We call it a B flat because it's downwards. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. If we're using a F major scale, we have to use flats, otherwise we're going to double use this A note. So use one or the other. Then you'll see something called your time signature. That's what these numbers indicate. And this indicates how many beats you have per bar. Let's look in your digital audio workstation. And you should have a section that shows you how many beats you have per bar. 3 beats per bar, so this would be 3 out of 4 if we were to change that. In this case, this is 2 out of 4, so you'd have 2 beats per bar. And you'll notice something has changed over here. You'll see these distances are changing. And this is indicating how many beats you have. You'll see 1, 2, 3 beats per bar, steps per beat. If I have only 2, you'll see it's only 1, 2 beats per bar. What is a bar exactly? This distance from this line, long line, to this next long line here is your bar. Essentially what we're doing is we're saying we break up this bar into pieces. And these little pieces here are the beats that we say. So if we would just use a metronome here, we can hear that it's going every 2 beats per bar. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. If we were to change the beats per bar to something else and play it again, one, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that's how many beats you have per bar. You'll see some dynamics. This is your volume, how loud or quiet you're going to play. If I were to record some notes, so I've played a few notes, and you can see over here in this bottom section we have these dynamics. These are the velocity. How hard am I hitting these notes on the piano? And I'm getting louder, I'm hitting these notes harder, and then I'm getting them quieter. If I hit them hard, you get a louder sound. We call this forte, indicated by an F. If I were to hit them quieter, we call that piano, or pianissimo. F for forte means loud, pianissimo is quiet. We also have MP, which is mezzo piano, or medium piano, medium quiet. MF, medium loud. And there's lots of different names for all of these things. And essentially, they're just saying how loud is this instrument going to be. And that could indicate your velocity, or it could just indicate your volume, because those are essentially the same things most of the time. Volume, louder, quieter. Sometimes you need to range from getting quieter to louder, or louder to quieter. And if you're going to do that in your sheet music, you should have a little symbol here, which indicates quieter, getting louder, or louder, getting quieter. That's what these indicate. Quieter, getting louder, louder, getting quieter. And finally, we get into this up here, which is some words, or sometimes you'll see a number, and that's indicating your speed. Whereas in your digital audio workstation, they use something called beats per minute. 80 beats per minute is slow. 160 beats per minute, well, that's a lot faster. How many beats, how many times are you hitting something per minute? Different genres of music tend to have different speeds. For example, dubstep tends to be 140. House music tends to be 128 beats per minute. This was invented before beats per minute and was used, because they didn't have exact timings that we have with software. So they just had to have a relative timing. And so they allowed the musician to improvise a bit more rather than having the exact second. And then the final thing to mention is the notes themselves. So if we have nothing, it's empty, there's no notes, we use something called rests. Rests indicate there's no sound, there's nothing being played. Anything other than a rest is a note, and it's something being played. To add notes, traditionally you had to write them by pencil, and you had to actually say, I'm going to add a note. 1 note, 2 notes, 3 notes, and figure out where they were going to be positioned within your scale, and do that for the timing, and figure out how to do that for the entire piece, compare that to other instruments, that were playing at the same time and try to figure out where does everything go together. And thank God we don't have to do that anymore. Now your software can do all of that work for you. When you export this sheet music, turn this into sheet music, it will maintain all of the timing for you. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about inputting notes anymore. Thank goodness. And when you're comparing this to a new instrument, you can just have a second instrument playing at the same time. And you can preserve the exact positioning so you know when that note is playing and have it hit at the exact same time. So much easier than trying to figure this out. However, just in case you did want to add some notes later on, you wanted to change it a bit, you need to understand how to read this at least. So these lines here indicate which note they're going to be pressed on. Each one of these positionings here indicates where the note is in the scale. So this, with that little line underneath the treble clef, underneath all these bars, is your middle C. For example, every note higher than this as we go along is a note higher. So this is your D, that's indicated by this note. E is the next note, F is the next note, and so on as you move all the way up. Okay, so what's the big picture here? The big picture is you don't have to worry too much about reading and writing music anymore. You can let your software do most of the work for you. There's tons of symbols that you could be spending all of your time going through music theory and going through lessons and trying to figure out what all of these different symbols mean. But it's just like words in a language, in a dictionary. There's a lot of words out there you don't need to know. You need to know enough to have a conversation. You need to know enough so you can communicate with your musician. You can spend all of your time composing melodies, getting the timing, the melody, figuring out what instruments work well together. Then what you can do once you've done that is, if you want to have realistic instruments played by real musicians, what you could do is export your music, send it to a software such as MuseScore, and it'll capture these MIDI notes, but it won't have the dynamics. So you'll have to go in and you'll say, I'm going to add in this loudness, this quiet, and then maybe some articulations as well. And then you can send that to your musician. Your musician will then take this piece, they'll read this document and say, okay, I get what you're trying to convey here. I can see the scale that I'm in. I can see the timing. I understand the timing of my piece. You've told me the dynamics, how loud and quiet it's going to be. And I can see these notes of the spacing, what their notes are supposed to be, and I can read this and play your melody. So this is how you can read music, and just the fundamentals, so you know just enough so that you can give something to a musician and they will be able to interpret your idea.